So I wanted to discuss today a little bit about the origin of the soul, or what is the original state of the soul, and how does the soul fall into the situation we're in now, where we have to take birth and we have old age, death, disease, and so many entanglements and problems. How did we as souls get into this condition, and how do we get out of this condition? Now, one of the problems in this world, the material world, let's call it, is that we become very entangled here. And then we have to work very hard to maintain our body. We have to have a job. We have to try to buy a house, pay rent, pay for all kinds of family members that are dependent on us. And so in this way we become very, very entangled, and therefore it becomes very difficult for us to think about how we got here and what are we doing here, what is the purpose of life. We become overwhelmed with the material world and the situation we're in the material world. So this is kind of like an illusion for the soul. The soul is eternal, and the soul falls into this very temporary life in the material world, and he thinks, I'm an American, I'm a Russian, I'm a Chinese, I'm Japanese, I'm this and that and the other. This is my village, my city, my country, and so on and so forth. And he identifies with this external situation, which is very temporary. How long are you going to be an American or a Russian or a Chinese or Russian or Japanese person? Not very long, because it's very temporary. It's very short duration. But while we're here, we become very overwhelmed and overcome with this illusion that we are this temporary situation. This is us. We identify with the external situation. So how did we get here in this situation? That is a question that philosophers have asked for thousands of years. Where did we come from? What are we doing here? And how do we get out of here? So I'm going to quote a little bit now from Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the Krishna religion, and he's going to describe to us a little bit how this happened. Srila Prabhupada: because we have got little independence, just like a very rich man's son sometimes gives up home life, his father and mother, he loiters in the street, that is his choice. Similarly, from Shastra, which is scripture, we can understand that originally we were in Krishna, with Krishna, but somehow or other we have come to enjoy this material world. Therefore we have been entangled. Now get out of this entanglement and go back to Krishna. That is our proposition. And a guest asked the question, if we had been in the state of perfect Krishna consciousness, we were with Krishna, we were with God, then surely we would have been able to have the awareness to know that material existence would have been no good for us. So why then would we have gone into this world? Prabhupada, that is called ignorance. That is ignorance, because we are a very small particle of Krishna. We are subjected to ignorance also. We are not fully in knowledge. Therefore, just like a child out of ignorance does something wrong. Similarly, Krishna Bulya Jiva Bhoga Vanchakade. We thought that by giving up Krishna's association we shall be happy, remaining independent. And then when we came here, we became entangled. So this is the sum and substance of Prabhupada's idea. We were with Krishna originally, and we were associated with Krishna, but Prabhupada says very often that we somehow or other became envious of Krishna. So we were in the spiritual world with Krishna, serving Krishna very nicely, but then we started to become envious. Why is Krishna getting all this service? Why does Krishna have all this glory and power, and everyone's only talking about Krishna? Why aren't they talking about me? Why am I not important? So we wanted to be Krishna's competitor, his competition. We wanted to be important. We wanted to have glory and power and different things. So we come to this world, and that's what we're fighting for. We're trying to get a position of power over others. We're trying to be glorified, and we have an ego problem. where we're trying to compete with other people here in this material world so that we can get to the top of the pile and be the most famous and the most wealthy and the most this, that, and the other. That is what happens in the material world. So that is because we're trying to become Krishna indirectly. So Krishna is the most famous, so we're trying to become famous. Krishna is the most wealthy, we're trying to become wealthy. Krishna is the most powerful, we are trying to become powerful, and so on and so forth. So it's a way that we're imitating Krishna. But even a humble person, a supposedly humble person in this world, they still have this underlying enviousness of Krishna. That's why they're here. They wouldn't be here in the first place. All the prisoners are at one time guilty of a crime, and that's why they're in the prison. And maybe they'll humble out somewhat in the prison, but they still are in the prison because they have not fully rectified themselves yet. So there's people who are pious, they believe in God, but they have also many material desires at the same time, simultaneously, so they can't go back to Krishna in that state. They have to be fully surrendered to Krishna to enter back into the kingdom, just like a person who's in the jail, he can't be saying, okay, I'm going to give up half of my crimes, and half of the time I'm going to be good and follow the law of the state. That doesn't work. You have to give up all of your criminal mentality to no longer be a criminal. So that's the same thing in Krishna's kingdom. He says, when you surrender to me and serve me fully, then you are welcome to come back. But if you still are holding back, if you're holding a grudge, if you're holding even a little bit of a grudge against Krishna, and you have a little bit of desire to be independent and not follow Krishna, then you're not qualified to go back to the kingdom. So how did we get here? And there are some examples even from the Bible. There's Satan. Satan was a highly placed angel in God's kingdom. He somehow or other he became envious of God, and he became a Satan. So really, from the Vedic point of view, we are all like Satans, all of us individual souls. We were with Krishna, we were highly placed angels at one time, we were serving nicely. Somehow or other we became envious, and that created a wedge between us and God. And so then we come to the material world, and according to the scriptures, when you first come to the material world, you're not so polluted and contaminated, so you become like a demigod. You become like a highly placed person in the material world because your purity level is still somewhat high. But from the heavenly planets, the demigod planets, people can still deteriorate and start to develop bad qualities and become envious and fight and squabble with one another and get involved in illicit sex and other kinds of entanglements. Even on the higher planets, that type of thing can happen and does happen, and so we lose our purity more and more and more, and then finally we fall to the earthly realm. And from the earthly realm, we can fall much further. We can go to the hellish planets from here. So that's what happens. We become independent, we fall to here, and then there's different grades of prisoners. We're all prisoners now in the material energy. The material energy is the prison house where the renegade souls have to reside. And we are all different prisoners in different rooms in the prison. So some of the rooms are very nice, just like in the regular prison. They have a better room for the mafia gang leader. He gets a cell by himself, which is nicely facilitated. It has its own shower, it has a television, it has some better situation. So he's a higher grade of prisoner. Or when they arrest the political prisoners, they sometimes give them a nicer facility in the prison than the car thief. The car thief gets a worse type of prison. So it's the same thing. We're all in different rooms in the prison. And some of the rooms are a little better than others, but all of them are ultimately prison rooms. So they're different somewhat, but similar. Because we're still entangled, whatever room we're in, we're still entangled in birth, old age, death, and disease, no matter how nice facility we have here. So how did we get here? We became envious of God. We disobeyed God. And Adam and Eve, another biblical example, they were in God's kingdom. They were in the garden. They had a very nice life. They didn't have to work. They didn't have to struggle. But God said, there's just one thing. You can't eat this apple. The apple is the knowledge of what? Don't become curious about the knowledge. The knowledge is, how do I become independent? That's what that apple represents. As soon as you start to contemplate, how do I become independent from God, then that's like eating the apple. Then that's forbidden. You can't do that. You cannot try to become independent from the Supreme Being. And as soon as you eat that apple, as soon as you have those desires, you're out of the kingdom. That's what happens. You're out of the kingdom, and then you're naked, and you have to dig the earth to make a garden and grow your own things, and you have to struggle. Now, it's all a very hardcore situation. So how come God does that? Why does God make life so hard in the material world? We have to struggle. We have enemies. We have problems with our body. We have problems from nature. There's big storms and typhoons and hurricanes and earthquakes, floods, so many natural disasters that happen here all the time. So our body's giving us a problem, nature's giving us a problem, the other living beings are giving us a problem, the humans, the tax man is giving us problems, the policeman is pulling us over for speeding, and there's trouble. We have trouble with our boss at work, and we have so many headaches with our family members. And then on top of that, we have all of the animals and the insects. The spiders are trying to bite you. The dog is barking at you. And so all kinds of living entities are giving you pain and trouble. So all the way around, you can't be peaceful in this world. There's always some thing or other attacking you. Either your own body is having a problem, the other living entities are giving you problems, or you're too hot, you're too cold, so many things. So God does that on purpose. He creates this atmosphere where you're going to be in distress, kind of always in distress. And the reason he does that is to encourage you to try to get back out of this material world. He's trying to send you a message. You, sir, cannot be happy in this material world. You should come back to the spiritual world and serve me. And in order for me to give you an impetus to do that, I'm going to make life here very difficult for you. You'll have to suffer so many ways in this world. So that's an intentional thing, and of course then people say, well, then God is cruel, God is being mean, why is God doing this, why is God doing that? Well, that's part of our same problem. We're trying to question God, and that is why we're here in the first place. So we're already here because we wanted to question his authority, and then on top of that we're saying, well, why is God causing suffering? Why isn't God doing this? And why isn't, we still think we're God's boss. We're going to tell God how to manage things. That's not our position. So we have to learn the hard way, generally speaking. There's different ways of learning. So God tells us in the scriptures, in the Bible, in the Vedas, in all major religions, the idea is you have to surrender to God. You have to love God. That's the point of religion. And if you follow God's instructions, then that's a test. He wants to see, are you going to follow me and try to serve me and then be with me, or are you going to ignore me and ignore my instructions and things like that? So Prabhupada's theme is called Back to Godhead, and that means we originally were with Krishna and we have to return back to that position. And he gives many quotes To substantiate that, we have to revive our dormant Krishna consciousness. We have to return to our original constitutional position. And he also says we became envious of Krishna. So obviously we were with Krishna in order to become envious of him. And he says we were all originally in Krishna's Leela or sport. Now there are some people who think that we did not originate with Krishna, most notably some of Prabhupada's godbrothers, and people like Gaur Govinda Maharaj, Narayan Maharaj, and others. They have disputed Prabhupada's idea. So when we were in India, the godbrothers were complaining about Prabhupada's title for his magazine, Back to Godhead, and they were saying we were never with Godhead. In particular, Sridhar Maharaj was saying that we originated in Brahman. Brahman is what Prabhupada calls the impersonal area between the material and spiritual worlds. And Prabhupada said that the Brahman is worse than hell, because in hell you might hear about Krishna, but in Brahman you will never hear about Krishna. So it seems unlikely that God would start out his children in hell or something even worse than hell. That really doesn't make sense. So Prabhupada says basically Krishna is an equal person with all of his children. All of his children start out equally. They all start out with him. But the Sridhar Maharaj people, Narayan Maharaj people, Gaur Govinda Maharaj people, and even many Christians believe that there are people who God places in heaven with him, and they stay there. And then there are the lesser class, second-tier children who end up suffering in the material world. So God has a bias with his children. He loves some children, gives them the kingdom with him. The lesser class of children are prone to fall and suffer and die and have all kinds of problems in the material world. That's not Prabhupada's idea. Prabhupada's idea is that everyone starts out equally. All of the children are equally situated, and that's even true in the material world with a material father. He starts out all of his children equally, at least normally. If he can afford a college education, he gives a college education to the 3 of his sons, for example. He gives all of them an equal chance. He doesn't just hand select, this child will be benefited and this child will suffer. That's not normal, even in a material father situation. So Krishna is the same. He's equal with everyone. And he provides the same opportunity for everybody to serve with him in the spiritual world originally. That's our original status. And then some of us choose to fall, or fall away, or become independent from Krishna, and that is our independent choice. So Krishna has to give us this choice. We have to be able to choose to serve him or not serve him. Otherwise we would just be robots. We would just be serving without any determination whether we wanted to serve or not serve. So we have desires, and Krishna respects those desires. He allows us to desire to serve him or not serve him. So that is a very sensible way of looking at God's position, and it gives a good explanation for how and why we fall to here. We fall to here because we determined to become independent from Krishna. We made that determination. God did not pre-select us to be either with him or not with him. He doesn't do that choosing for us. Otherwise that makes God into the bad guy. God is pre-selecting some souls to be with him, some souls not to be with him. That would make God the cause of the suffering and failure of the fallen souls. God is not the cause. We are our own cause for our own failure. Of course, it is hard to understand how so many living entities could have fallen from grace with God. It doesn't make a lot of sense. There's trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of souls just on your country, the United States. What to speak of all over the world. And Prabhupada also says that each cell in your body is a soul, is a jiva soul, is a living entity, and it's now in a cell body. It's a living entity by itself. So that means that soul, which is a cell now in your body, was at one time serving Krishna. So if we think about that level of numbers of souls, each body in the material world is full of souls, and there's also germs and microbes and so many microscopic entities as well that are also souls, that have a soul. So the numbers of souls is pretty unlimited, and for that reason, some people doubt that they could have fallen. How could so many people reject God's authority? So there are trillions and trillions of souls just in a short distance around us. When we consider that all the cells are souls in all the different bodies around us, and then there are so many minuscule living entities and larger entities, and then Prabhupada also says every planet is inhabited. So we can just imagine there's hundreds and trillions and billions of living entities on each planet, and then there's also an unlimited number of universes. Prabhupada says there's the same amount of universes as there are mustard seeds in a bucket. So that's quite a few. Yet, at the same time, Prabhupada says that the fallen souls is only a smaller portion of the population of Krishna's empire. So that means we are the lesser number of souls. Most of the souls have remained in the spiritual world with Krishna, and they chose to continue to serve him and not to become renegades and independent. So Prabhupada compares that to the prison house in the city. The city prison house houses a certain number of people at all times, but that's not the larger percentage of the city. The larger percentage of the people residing in the city choose to follow the laws of the city, so they stay outside the prison. So now we're in the material world. We have fallen here, and there are different quotes in the Vedas where almost immediately, as soon as people fall here, they start murdering and killing and behaving in a despicable way because they become overcome by the material energy. The material energy increases people's illusion and causes them to think they can do unlimited amounts of harm and damage to others, even. It's possible. So they're in illusion, and the illusion simply increases the more they try to become independent. So in the spiritual world, Krishna has relationships with all of the souls there, different types of relationships. There's Krishna's shoes, they're living entities. And there's Krishna's flute. There's flowers, there's trees, there's animals like cows, and there's human type forms of souls, and they are in different grades of relationships. A friendly relationship, a parental relationship where people think that they are superior to Krishna. They have to advise him. In other words, they love Krishna so much they don't understand he is God, so they have that superior attitude with Krishna. And Krishna enjoys having people try to order him around. He thinks that's a great pastime. And then he has also queens who are in like a formal conjugal relationship, and then there are more like girlfriends, also conjugal relationship, but less formal. So all of us were previously in one of those relationships. All of the souls that are fallen in this world have a dormant relationship hidden within us. It's there in a dormant state. And Prabhupada compares it to a match. A match has fire dormant within it, and it just needs to manifest, and then the fire comes out. So our relationship with Krishna is dormant within us, but it's covered over or hidden by the material energy. So Prabhupada's idea is that we have to revive our previous relationship with the Supreme Lord, and therefore revive our position, go back to serving Krishna in the spiritual world. And he compares that to a rivet that falls out of the ocean liner. A rivet is a tiny little part of the ocean liner. It falls out of the ocean liner, it falls to the bottom of the ocean, but the ocean liner keeps going. It doesn't need that rivet. It's just a minuscule part of the ship. So the rivet has to go back to its position on the ship. It doesn't have any use just lying by itself on the bottom of the ocean. So Prabhupada compares our reconnecting with Krishna to that situation. We have to be like the rivet that goes back onto the boat. And Prabhupada has devised all kinds of means for us to remember our relationship with Krishna. He's written extensive books about Krishna's pastimes so that we can meditate on Krishna and try to remember who is Krishna, what is Krishna like, and therefore revive our relationship with Krishna, whatever that relationship was. So we should be very assured, rest assured, we are eternal beings. We simply have forgotten our actual situation. Prabhupada says it's just like the son of a wealthy person becomes a poor beggar on the street, and he forgets that his father is really a wealthy man who has big mansions and kingdoms. And so the son just has to remember his relationship with the rich father and go back to the rich father's situation, where he will enjoy the same, facilities as God himself. He'll be with God, enjoying with God. And that is what God wants. God wants us to be with him. And that's why he creates so many problems in the material world, so that we will have an impetus and an incentive to get out of here and go back to God. So Prabhupada says we should chant God's name, remember God, and he's given us the Hare Krishna mantra to chant. And by chanting, we remember Krishna, we think of Krishna, and by thinking of Krishna, we go to Krishna. We go to what we think of. If we are thinking of, how to become a better businessman, we go to the businessman's committee and we become a better businessman. And if we want to play golf, we go to the golf club and play golf. So if we want to become devotees of Krishna, we have to remember Krishna and remember the pastimes of Krishna with his devotees, which are described in the Vedas, and revive our original constitutional position with Krishna. So the God brothers who thought we were never with Krishna, when asked, why did these God brothers not accept that we were once with Krishna? Why don't they accept back to Godhead? Why are they making fun of the back to Godhead idea? Prabhupada said that is because they are tinged with Mayavada. Mayavada means impersonalism. They have not fully understood that Krishna is a person, we are persons, we all start out in a personal relationship with that person. We do not start out in some abstract non-existence in the Brahman or the impersonal Brahmajyoti, which is the dividing line between the material and spiritual worlds. That is not our origin. We originate as persons because we are persons and God is a person. So I hope this helps, and I would like to hear people's comments and counterpoints or whatever they have to say on this matter. Give me their ideas on this. Thank you very much. Hari